basically have an Aave account in your pocket with this card where you can hold all your crypto collateral. You can choose to hold the yield-bearing assets, and then you can access a real-time credit line with every swipe against them, and you can earn 2 to 3% cash back.
DeFi wallets are doing very well. They're getting fed by asset appreciation and new yields, whereas our TradFi bank accounts are just covering everything that is needed for day-to-day survival, but nothing more than that.
Yeah.
And I think getting credit cards into DeFi with a native integration like that is a huge unlock.
You could not build this cash product if you didn't have tokenized yield underneath, right? Because you need to have the ability to instantly have the yield accrue and instantly sell it for its underlying asset and instantly then turn that into USD and process payment, right? And you can't do that in TradFi, not just for regulatory reasons, but also for tech reasons, right?
Everybody was depositing into EigenLayer and the restaking projects building on top of that, EtherFi, Renzo, Kelp, and many more. Many of them have kind of faded into irrelevance.
The core of all this stuff, like there are actually real features that make finance better for the end consumer, right? And those, the two main ones, at least that EtherFi builds around, or probably three, to me are one, self-custody, right?
Good morning and welcome back to another episode of the Odyssey Podcast. Today we are joined by Slater, who is the head of marketing at EtherFi. Slater, how is it going?
Good. It's good to be here. Thank you for having me. Always excited to chat on a podcast, and you're a friend of EtherFi, so looking forward to the show, man.
Great having you on. EtherFi has been pretty dominant in the restaking and DeFi space ever since spring 2024. So maybe to start, what's your background? How did you end up in crypto? How did you end up at EtherFi?
Yeah, sure. I have a semi-unique path. So originally, I was a startup founder. I've actually been a startup founder my entire career. Dropped out of college and joined a company, was promoted to co-founder, ultimately couldn't raise a Series B, then moved back home and founded one of the bigger cannabis companies right when it got legalized back in 2019. And scaled that. We did pretty well, but then margins compressed a little bit and big players came in and we ended up selling for a decent price. And I was actually the founder of the blockchain club back in college. I've always been extremely into crypto Twitter and I've spent a lot of time thinking and learning about this stuff, but I didn't kind of know the right entry point yet. So from 2020 to 2021, I just ran a small fund, mostly my own and one of my friends' capital, and kind of used that as a way to give myself a full-time job. Like, how do I figure out the right entry point into this space? And eventually landed on an idea for a DeFi protocol. So my DeFi protocol was called Blueberry. We were a leveraged money market, one of the first ones that kind of built that into the core of the protocol, where you could one-click leverage up to 30x on certain strategies. Kind of similar to what you see with what Gearbox has done really well today. We did raise a good amount of VC and had a pretty successful launch in May of 2024. And unfortunately, the protocol got hacked about a month into it. Growth was going pretty well. One of my co-founders is still working on some interesting stuff over there today. We have like a tokenized HLP and some other interesting products coming. But I got an opportunity to meet the EtherFi guys. We had worked a little bit together when I was working on the leveraged money markets back at Blueberry, and they had this opening for the head of marketing role. I really believe in this kind of DeFi banking thesis that EtherFi has created and gotten really pretty much executed on already, but we're still at the early stages, right? Like there's a lot of room to grow. But I just think this is one of the few companies in this space that really has a chance to take on the banking sector and already is in a lot of ways, and making the world actually a better place, like delivering real value to users. So I was really excited about the opportunity, met with Rock and Mike a bunch of times and joined about a month and a half ago. So there will be some things where I'm still getting up to speed, but there are some things I already know a whole lot about. So excited to talk to you today. That's my background.
Very cool. Was your Blueberry project, was that related to GMX back then? Because I think they branded themselves a lot with like this Blueberry ecosystem and like everything blue stuff, right?
Yeah, that's right. We actually founded the company and named it. I think GMX was around, but they weren't like a thing yet. And at least they were like building in that stage when we started building as well. And it kind of just was a funny coincidence. But yeah, we get that a lot. We got that.
Yeah. I think there even was a Blueberry podcast back then.
Yeah.
I don't know if they renamed it and if it's still around, but I still remember these days. I think that was winter, spring 2023.
That was the one bright spot, and I think it was like 2022 too. Yeah, it was great.
Only thing that kind of was up and coming back then. But
Right.
yeah, getting back to EtherFi, I mean, you're now sitting at still a couple billion in TVL after all the restaking hype in summer of 2024. Just to recap for our audience, in summer 2024, and I think that narrative emerged in spring last year, restaking was the number one mindshare grabbing topic in all of DeFi among all yield farmers. Everybody was depositing into EigenLayer and the restaking projects building on top of that, EtherFi, Renzo, Kelp, and many more. Many of them have kind of faded into irrelevance. So maybe can you give an explanation to the audience? What was the initial thesis at the onset of EtherFi, and how has it evolved ever since the summer of last year?
Yeah, for sure. One thing to correct first, we're at over $10 billion in TVL now. We're getting close to Lido size and Aave size. I think we're top five in TVL, either number four or number five,
So
depending on.
really dominating the restaking space right now, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say the wrong number. Don't obviously, as a podcast, you are quoting me on it, but don't quote me on this. But I think we're about 10x bigger than the next closest restaking partner now, and so yeah, really have pulled away from the pack largely just with execution. But your question was, how has the restaking landscape evolved since then, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I mean, I think early on in the restaking days, it was really just about who had the most hype airdrop farm, right? And who had the most DeFi integrations, because it was like 100% speculation at the time of who was going to best execute. And, AVSs and operators were starting to come online. But for that to really play out meaningfully, everybody always knew that was a really long-term project, right? And honestly, there have been progress points and milestones since then, but still to this day, most of the actual yield coming into restaking has been still speculation, right? And token rewards from things that like aren't fully live, economically speaking. And so I think people are just still making the bet on like who's going to be able to figure this out, and who has the best ability to execute as a team in the longer term. And I think one thing that made me really excited to join EtherFi, one thing I really believe about EtherFi is we are incredibly customer and execution oriented, where it's like we're not an if you build it, they will come team. We go and fix all the problems and like create the future that we want to see constantly and grind really hard to accomplish that. And so, I mean, I think part of it's the yield, right? But part of it is also just like a bet on the team that's going to figure that out in the long term and be able to deliver sustainable yields. And yeah, we've obviously expanded the product line a lot since then. So we've kind of evolved from this concept of just the leading liquid restaking token into this DeFi bank concept where now you can actually have an account that feels a lot more like a Web2 experience, and you can have different types of yield products beyond just restaking. For example, all of our liquid products, right, where now you can use BTC, USD, or of course ETH, and you can have a little bit more of a proprietary custom strategy approach that, yeah, you're taking a little bit more risk, but the reward is proportional to that. And some users want that, right? So you can keep it simple with the staking and restaking products. You can use the liquid products for a different risk reward trade off. And you can now use this all in kind of a unified account that is actually attached to real world payments, on and off ramping in fiat, and really is starting to look like a complete banking experience. And all of that kind of feeds into itself, right? Like each product, you start with the trusted liquid staking brand. And then maybe now that you trust the brand, it makes sense to try out a different product from the company, right? And then maybe now that you trust liquid products as well, you want to try the payments product, and all of a sudden, everything in your crypto world is EtherFi. And then, of course, we have to deliver well on all of those products, right? And make sure that we're actually delivering the most compelling solution, because DeFi users will go where the best solution is. So it's doing both at the same time, right? It's like delivering a more complete platform, but also making sure we're at the top of our game in every single vertical.
It's the primitive of restaking, which is that essentially you tap into the economic security of the Ethereum main chain by building anything on top, and you don't want to bootstrap your own validator set, bootstrap your own consensus mechanisms. And for restaking, there are these operators, which then, depending on the risk profile of your project, can pick if they sort of want to act as proxy validators. Probably this description is technically not 100% accurate, but That is
Right.
kind of the essence of restaking, I guess. Is this primitive still relevant to what EtherFi is doing today? Or would you say that you kind of have moved on and you're now being positioned with over 10 billion TVL, one of the top DeFi protocols? You just think, okay, we are in a unique position where we can have an actual impact on DeFi and can capitalize on all the unlocks and features and products on the front end user side.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just give a few caveats here because I mean, my mandate as the head of marketing is largely to grow the user base, right? And especially on the cash and payment side. And the team that was here before me was much more focused on the core restaking and liquid products, right? And I'm kind of looking at the company more holistically as this DeFi bank concept of like, how can we actually deliver a strictly better banking experience? And yeah, part of that is always going to be yield products. But from my perspective, like that's how I see restaking as like a customer acquisition tool, right? To the end user. So I think this would probably be a better question for like Mike and maybe Rock or maybe some of the tech leads about how they actually see the reality of restaking evolving. Whereas I'm more so just on like the user growth side, and I probably won't have the most educated opinion for you. But that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah, maybe we should have a is restaking dead debate on the pod going forward. I think that would be pretty entertaining
I
because
mean, I think broadly, I have heard Mike talk about this, and I think our stance is that, and again, not to speak for him, but I'm pretty sure that close to our stance is that it's something that just still takes time, right? Like, and everybody knew this from the beginning.
yeah,
It's a very complex system, and all of the pieces are definitely being adjusted. And I think by some of the smartest people in the space, and I think the result there is going to be something positive and very long term oriented. And I think everybody's aligned with that. Like, we definitely have not ditched the concept or like moved on from it. You know, it's still at the core of the business. We just see a kind of bigger vision with the whole DeFi bank strategy.
the concept still makes sense. I think it is very emblematic of the 2023 and 2024 macro crypto trend of just building out infrastructure a lot, but with too little attention to what applications, what use cases can you actually build on top of that, or what use cases are other people building on top of that. And I
Yeah.
think 2025 has been shown a lot of progress on that side with the rise of Ethena and also protocols like Pendle, Fluid, Syrup, all of these things becoming a little more mainstream and everybody knowing about them. Not only a few dozen yield farmers who are hanging around in the DeFi dojo and other yield farming communities. So I do think we are seeing a lot of progress there, and we have reached a stage where the infrastructure is built out to an extent where we can drive adoption a lot, and the infrastructure will very likely handle it. Obviously, we cannot onboard the entire world from one day to the next, so it's not going to be sufficient to bear the loads of billions of people. But yeah, at least an order of magnitude going on from here. So looking at the status quo of EtherFi, what have you built out with the EtherFi card? How did the concept come about, and what can the users do on EtherFi right now?
Yeah. Um, I can answer, I think, two out of the three of those. Mike would have a better perspective on like what the actual inspiration point was for creating the card. I know it was from his brain. And I think Mike's always kind of had a great product sense, just kind of understand what users want naturally. But yeah, he'd have a better story for you there. I can tell you what the card is, and kind of what the future for it is. So it really is the reason why I wanted to join this company. I've always, and I think pretty much everybody has always seen that we've built these products that are objectively better for the end user, but they're kind of just not able to use them because of the existing infrastructure in the real world and regulatory capture and all these things that have prevented crypto from going mainstream to this point, scalability, usability. But I think a lot of those pieces, or at least enough of those pieces for a solid MVP that can be improved a lot, kind of came into place in the last few years while the market was still pretty bearish and like not that much was going on in DeFi. Quietly, there was a big group of people that were working on improving UX, improving scalability to a point where you could have damn near equivalent of a user experience and the attachment to the TradFi rails that are necessary to give people access in the real world in the ways that they were used to. And so I think Mike and the team just kind of realized that now was the time to start something like this. And did a few iterations on the product early on, but finally landed on this concept where it's almost like a hybrid account between the credit card that you're used to, right? But also using stable coins and the ability to pay directly. And so rather than a traditional credit card where you just have a credit limit, it's related to your credit score. What's really popular in DeFi is over collateralized borrowing, right? Because everybody wants to hold all their crypto. They want to avoid paying taxes. They want to pay a low interest rate, ideally, and they want to use the stable coins they borrow to pay for stuff in the real world. So we were like, well, what if we could create a card that just does exactly that? And we kind of build the smart contract infrastructure on the back end, and then use some connecting tech to then settle that on TradFi rails, right? Through a card. And so that's kind of a long-winded way of explaining that you basically have an Aave account in your pocket with this card where you can hold all your crypto collateral. You can choose to hold the yield-bearing assets, of course, with some disclaimers there, depending on your jurisdictions, where you are, what's available to you. But you could hold the yield-bearing versions of EtherFi assets, and then you can access a real-time credit line with every swipe against them, and you can earn 2 to 3% cash back. And let's say you don't want to have that complexity, right? Like you're just a normal user, you want to have a checking account, but ideally a better one. You can also just use stablecoins in the direct pay mode where you're just selling with every swipe, and the selling is automatic. It costs $0. The only fee that we charge on the whole platform for now is a 1% FX fee, which we're working to remove in the next few months. So when you put all that together and like frame it from a traditional user experience, right? Like if you're just using stablecoins, basically you have stable coins, you have dollars, and like a checking account, you can earn yield on them, and you get 3% cash back at the same time. Like none of those things exist in TradFi, right? Like you have to put it into a savings account, have some type of duration lock, and probably earn a lot lower yield than you could access in DeFi. And you get zero cash back. Maybe like very rarely there's some weird products that give you like a little bit of cash back. So the economic terms are so much better, and it's so cool to see because like this is all the stuff that's possible with tokenization with these DeFi tools that we built over the last 5 years, but like now attached to the real world in a meaningful way that fits in your day-to-day life. That's the product. Sorry, it's a bit long-winded, but it just makes me really excited. It's been super fun to see all the user feedback. Everybody loves it, and yeah, we're just continuing to kind of improve the UX and scale from here.
It is a big unlock for sure. Do you know the meme with the water fountain drip where like the fat guy is sitting at one end and he's like getting all the water and the skinny guy is like getting a few drops? That's how many of us have been dealing between like our traditional finance bank accounts and our DeFi wallets. Like the DeFi wallets are doing very well. They're getting fed by asset appreciation and new yields, whereas our TradFi bank accounts are just covering everything that is needed for day-to-day survival, but nothing more than that.
Yeah.
And I think getting credit cards into DeFi with a native integration like that is a huge unlock to make all this on-chain infrastructure, all of these yield opportunities, all of these new incentive games and economic game theory shenanigans we are playing on the chain more usable for everyday life.
Yeah,
Can
for
you
sure.
explain a little more how the payment flow actually works? So like what happens to the stable coins or to your ether that you're spending with the EtherFi credit cards? How does it make the bridge over to the TradFi infrastructure?
Yeah, so basically everything just gets swapped for stable coins, and then we settle that. I actually don't want to speak too deeply to this because there are probably a lot of intricacies and like regulatory disclaimers here about like how exactly everything works. So maybe it's not a question we go too deeply into, but basically when you have crypto, it gets swapped for stable coins. First, we cover the fees on that. It's a reasonable exchange rate. There's no hidden fees or anything like that. And then USDC is ultimately settled into cash in order to process the transaction in real life. It's a card that is on the Visa network as well, so it can be accepted and used anywhere that Visa cards are accepted, and that's a huge unlock for usability.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean that's pretty much everywhere.
yeah, right, exactly. And there are some limitations to jurisdictions where you can access the card because you do have to KYC to access this. It's pretty lightweight. You just have to put in your ID. In most cases, you don't have to do like anything beyond that. But yeah, it's available in many countries across the world, and that's pretty great.
How has adoption of the card been going so far? Like, have you been able to unlock a whole new set of users who have not interacted with EtherFi before, or are all the existing depositors who deposited doing the restaking campaigns now trying to, okay, what can I do with these deposits? Do I maybe want to spend them in the quote unquote real world? What trends have you been seeing there?
Yeah, it certainly is unlocking an entirely new user base, and that's kind of why I talked about the flywheel effect earlier. Is they all kind of feed into each other, right? Like, of course, a lot of people who hold the restaking assets or the liquid assets are going to want to access spending power against them in a convenient way and earn the cash back. So users definitely have ported over, but over half of the new users we're seeing are like from random countries, from sorry, sometimes not even not really Web3 users in the first place. We do have fiat on and off ramping now. I think over half the users really never touched EtherFi products before, but then obviously they start to as they use the account. And all the growth has been pretty much organic so far. So I joined a little bit over a month ago. We've started a few paid channels here and there, but for the most part, it's all been product led. You can refer your friends and earn from it. So you can earn a percent of their spend if you refer them as a user, and we just kind of pay that out to be generous, right? And so that drives a pretty substantial amount of product led growth, but a lot of it is just organic too. Like we've gotten so much earned media from this. We've gotten so many DeFi people who just kind of reach out and go like, "Oh my god, like this is the thing I wish I had been able to do for so long now, and you guys have just like made it easy and are paying me to use it." Like it's great. And so yeah, a ton of it's been organic, super good feedback. We are going to start onboarding more and more paid channels and accessing more external user bases. It honestly almost surprises me though how much of it has come from just like news sources that people that weren't really familiar with EtherFi before. It just kind of speaks to how compelling the full product suite is.
On the user retention side, do you think that the cashback incentives, and I think there's also like a sign up bonus right now if you sign up with certain referral links, how sustainable are these, or like are these kind of financing themselves? Are you supplying cash into them, or are you paying them out with the EtherFi token? What are the rough economics behind the cash card?
Yeah, so we actually, I mean, I don't think I could disclose the exact amount of revenues that we make in the back end, but and it's pretty complex, all the different ways that payment networks work. There's a lot of different costs and revenues associated with it. But I can say that the cashback structures that we have are set at pretty sustainable levels. So we have this like 3 to 5 cashback ongoing campaign, at least until the end of December, where like no matter what tier you are, you're earning 3% plus. But the standard tiers without that incentive campaign are already 2% for the first tier, and then 3 and 3, and then 4 for the final tier on everything. And so the incentive is really not that big of a part of that. And yeah, we intend for those to be sustainable over a long, long period of time. And so there's different ways that we earn revenue from it, right? Like some is on the transaction fee side, and some is on the products that people are actually holding in their wallets. But yeah, overall, we think we've created a really sustainable and productive economic model that we don't plan to just rug everybody on the cashback anytime soon. And there is kind of that narrative, right? Like there's a lot of crypto cards coming out these days, and everybody's like, "Oh, it's just like the new DeFi farming is jumping from one high cashback card to the next." And I think like as a general company philosophy, we're very against that kind of approach. Like, and we're also mature, right? Like we're not farming our users to do an airdrop at a high FDV. Our token's live. So we're supplementing here and there to drive growth. But yeah, we intend for the structure to stay largely the same in the long term.
Yeah, there was a short-lived credit card hype in the last cycle where you had all the crypto.com credit cards, you had the Nexo credit cards. I think there was another on-chain one which made the rounds. I forgot the name of it, but it also had pretty decent perks, and I think some cashback incentives which turned out to be not as sustainable as initially proclaimed. So
Well,
yeah, I
some of
think
them are just so like Ponzi-ish and complex, right? Like I don't want to speak too badly on any competitors, but like some of them, like you have to buy like $50,000 or $100,000 of the token to get the cash back. Like no, like I don't know. We try to set reasonable cashback levels. We do some incentives at the beginning. Like there's another one that I think is giving like 8% cash back, but it's in points at an FDV that they set themselves. I think that was pretty funny. I don't know.
classic
This
move.
definitely not the game that we're trying to play,
Yeah, I think what's interesting here is that you guys have the opportunity to be one of the projects that not only brings on-chain infrastructure to the masses, but which also is able to capture the value accruing from that. Because what we have seen in the recent months with all the ETF inflows, with the integration of blockchain tech into fintech companies like Robinhood, like all of these adoption waves and integrations of the technology this space has been working on for the last 10 years, none of this value accrual and value capture is going to actually happen by on-chain native products. It's all TradFi and fintech companies just tapping into the existing infrastructure. So I do
Yep.
think that you guys are positioned in a quite unique matter there. So maybe in the mid to long run, where do you view yourselves as a company? Who do you aim to compete with? Do you think you have the chance to build something completely new? Is it kind of the American Express of DeFi, or how do you guys view yourselves?
Yeah, that's a great question, and this may sound lofty, but I think we think a little bit bigger than that, and it's kind of a general company philosophy. Like we think big and we execute big, and we think of ourselves as kind of the on-chain JP Morgan in the early days, and that is kind of the long-term plan and vision and type of organization that we want to build. And I think Amex is another great comparison for the credit card side of things and kind of where our brand and user base sit on the spectrum, right? Where we prefer to be a premium product that's really good customer service, with really good execution, that does what we say, that delivers products on time when we say we're going to, and that creates things that are actually valuable to have great relationships with our customers in the longer term. And speaking to like the product stack and vision and what you said, I think it's really important in crypto to focus on the verticals where there is a clear profit center and then figure out how to stack those verticals rather than like just focusing on one thing. And I think when you look at traditional finance, like this rings true, right? Like how do all the banks and funds or brokers, whatever, work, that they all have these massive vertically integrated organizations and their customers then flow across all of the different products. Because at the end of the day, like there's a lot of complex and forward thinking stuff you can do to stay ahead of the market in finance. But what's most important is maintaining trust and relationships with your customers and doing what you say you're going to do in order to accomplish that. And that reputation, like at the end of the day, a lot of the products end up being around the same place. And we're a very innovative company. We try to out innovate everybody. We try to deliver things before anybody knew they were possible, and out execute. But in the longer term, right, it's like how many things do you really do in finance? You trade, you borrow, you lend, and there's lots of different forms of those products. And then DeFi, we have staking as well and a few more unique yield sources. But yeah, long term, it has to be about being an extremely trustworthy organization. And in the shorter term, it's about continuing to develop and innovate and find ways to make these verticals work together to create an even better, more compelling, both economically and from a UX perspective, product. And so we have one really big announcement for kind of the final vertical in this stack. And then other than that, it's kind of just improving everything, making it equivalent or way better than the stuff you can get in TradFi, and making it more economically advantageous and easier to use.
What does a DeFi bank look to you? Like what products are next in the pipeline? What do you want to offer to users other than just spending their crypto? Are you trying to natively integrate certain lending markets or any other product portfolio? Are we going to mortgage our houses via EtherFi soon? What can we expect?
Yeah, so one thing that's already in beta, and some users have found this by just scrolling down on their settings, is fiat transfers. You can send and receive wires, ACH, IBAN for Europe, SEPA, and pretty much all the monetary standards. And you can basically treat your EtherFi vault like a real bank account now, and like receive, pay there, send and receive wires, etc. So that I think is a huge unlock to really call ourselves that, right? And the fees are super low. It's fast. It's great. And then there's kind of one glaring huge feature to add on that I can't really talk about yet, but you could probably guess it pretty easily, especially with all of the trends going on today, and also kind of playing forward the outcome of us partnering with Hyperbeat in order to launch this BE Hype LST, and what we might be planning with that might be pretty clear already. So there's a lot of exciting stuff coming. Listing new collateral assets, I think, is also really important. Obviously, ETH is our home and our first love, and it's in our name, and it'll always be our biggest focus. But I think if we're going to truly serve customers as kind of a bank-like experience, we also need to allow them to hold the assets that they want. And so beyond Hype, and we have Solana on the roadmap as well, and a few other assets on the roadmap as well. We just added Tether, and yeah, a bunch more stuff coming in that regard, even in kind of different asset categories, which I also can't quite announce yet. But it's really just completing all those features, adding on both horizontally and then the one kind of final vertical, which you could probably guess.
I like your guys' approach a lot because you're thinking about it from a holistic perspective. I mean, in the past, there have been ideas and like I've brainstormed with friends about what would it take to build kind of the American Express of crypto. What would it take to build out a crypto M&A boutique or to compete with individual functions of things we see in traditional finance or that we are about to see in crypto too, which have not matured yet. But you guys are in that unique position where you have been able to amass a huge chunk of TVL through the restaking days, and now you have all of this money on EtherFi lying around. I mean, it's customers, depositors' money, obviously, but I mean, you're positioned very uniquely, and you have the firepower to build out a broad spectrum of product offerings there. Maybe
Yeah.
to dive a little deeper into your role as the head of marketing, on a very high level, do you think that crypto actually has a marketing and a growth problem, or has it so far been an issue on the product side of things? Because my argument has always been when I talk to growth people in crypto that, well, what do you want to grow? You guys do not have a product. Like, if there's a lack of useful products, you cannot grow it. Very complex to understand. It is hard to access. And if you are a new entrant, especially into DeFi, you'll get farmed to death by a couple of hundred very active and very smart yield farmers. And that is about it. I mean, it's fun to play around with it, but we are still very far from a point where we can say, yes, this is mass marketable like a Robin Hood or other neo brokers and neo banks that you see in the US and the European Union.
Yeah. Well, I think we're pretty close. And that's why I joined. And I think that's why they kind of felt it was time to make this hire. But yeah, I mean, broadly, I agree with you. And I mean, I think there is an early function to a marketing and growth oriented person at DeFi startups, because kind of the main feature that we developed in DeFi is bootstrapping capital with incentives and community organization, right? And I mean, EtherFi, as well as any other product, does require that phase in order to then go and build out the other verticals that make a financial suite valuable. And it's also just kind of a timing thing, both from a company maturity perspective, but also a market readiness perspective and regulatory perspective. And I think a lot of those things have kind of come together for the industry at large in the last year or two. And obviously, the regulatory environment shifting so substantially, making it a little bit easier to actually operate and not just like take all these super gray market loophole approaches to even launch a product. And so I think marketing people and growth people have always had a role in helping bootstrap what DeFi company needs, but like the whole industry wasn't really ready to really build something that could compete with TradFi until I think this last year or two. And I think the early signs are there and pretty clear. And one thing I wanted to touch on in my previous answer is at the core of all this stuff, like there are actually real features that make finance better for the end consumer, right? And those the two main ones, at least that EtherFi builds around, or probably three to me, are one, self custody, right? Like that's important to a big group of people, and people don't realize the risk of bank runs and holding your funds at various financial institutions because we've bailed them out the last 20 years. Like those are real risks that have caused like tons of damage in the history of the world. And having self custody is a huge kernel and unlock to make a better experience for the end user. And then tokenization. I mean, now we have Larry Fink and the SEC and everybody in the world talking about tokenization. And it's because the efficiencies are real. Like you could not build this cash product if you didn't have tokenized yield underneath, right? Because you need to have the ability to instantly have the yield accrue and instantly sell it for its underlying asset and instantly then turn that into USD and process the payment, right? And you can't do that in TradFi, not just for regulatory reasons, but also for tech reasons, right? Like the technology just doesn't exist to be able to create that same kind of product. So, anyways, I feel like I'm getting away from the question a little bit, but yeah, my role as a marketer,
We have time.
my role as a marketer is to actually make sure those kernels are understood by the public in the wider market now that we have actual useful tech stack, and to also like increase the size of that market, right? And the awareness that like these things matter and here's how they make your life better. And I think the tech is finally there where a lot more people like that are going to become more and more valuable in the space than they used to be.
What are the growth and marketing strategies that are currently employed at EtherFi, and how are these setting you apart from your competition? Because if I look at my crypto Twitter timeline, if I look at the Discords where I am active in, like, you guys are very present, people are talking about you, members are responsive. So yeah, you are able to capture a lot of mind share. How do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it, a lot of it came from just like the early organic hype, right? But then it's about retaining those users and making them into advocates. We do have some paid channels now where we're actually advertising in various places where we can, and those are starting to convert more and more. But yeah, the core of it is just having a community that you actually take care of and that wants to talk about you. And then we're a big product led growth team. So implementing things like the referral campaign where you can refer your friends and earn 1% of their spend turns everybody into an advocate by sharing basically all the money we make on it with the actual users who are growing the product, right? And that's kind of the core kernel of crypto growth. And so that's the biggest focus, turning some paid channels on. We don't really do paid KOL stuff. We do a lot of earned media. Mike does a lot of podcast interviews. I'm doing this now, and we get a lot of coverage from the media. I think because we tend to launch products that are like on meta and interesting and like innovative, and so that part helps a lot with the conversational buzz as well. But all pretty simple stuff right now. We'll start to scale up and do more complex stuff over time.
For the credit card, do you want to give our audience a brief rundown of all the perks and benefits that they currently have, just in case they're
Yeah,
on the brink of signing up? Because I think if you're new to DeFi, it is somewhat complex to understand the whole like liquid cash versus the just cash back. Where can I earn additional yield on the sort of collateral behind it? So yeah, how can people understand that?
yeah, I mean, a lot of that is a regulatory issue, right? Like, I can't call it things like a bank because it's not, in theory, even if it has similar functionality. So I'll do my best. Is I think the simplest way to use the card is as a replacement for, even though it is a credit card, as almost a replacement for your debit card that is like a funded account. So you could transfer your fiat or your stable coins, whatever you have, or your ETH or your Bitcoin, and just hold it here. And then you could spend in real time with the card, either by borrowing against it or spending the assets directly. Every time you do that, whether you're borrowing or spending directly, you earn at least 3% cash back until December 31st of this year. Even after December 31st, the starting tier, you get 2% back on everything. So like, do you get that with your debit account? No. And so that's huge, just as a way to spend your money. Then on top of that, as you spend money, I think it's bound. There's a number of different ways to earn points, but as you level up, it's pretty easy to get to the first level. It's 3% fixed plus bonus right now as we have an incentive campaign going on everything. The next tier is also 3% with a few other perks and benefits, including like conference activations, tickets, things like that. And then the final tier, which is very hard to get to be honest. But if you're a huge spender, if you're a huge whale, is great. You get 4% back on every single purchase. You get access to our venture fund and the deals that we do through that, and it kind of becomes like a private banking relationship, right? But not a bank with the EtherFi team. And so those are the four tiers and functionality that you get with anything on the credit card. On top of that, the assets that are on the card, you can use if you're in certain jurisdictions, you can use liquid assets, which are yield bearing tokenized assets while you hold them and they sit there. And finally, we have a travel portal. This launched pretty recently, and it's really great. You get up to 60% off any
Yeah,
hotels
I've
that
seen
book.
that. I think that's a pretty
It's
cool
really
software.
nice. It's like way better than any price you'll get on Expedia or Airbnb or Booking.com, really anything, hotels.com. Like I've used them all.
Very nice. Is there any other topics you'd like to cover? Anything that is about to come up on EtherFi or anything else in crypto you're passionate about? No, I think that there is a lot of upside and merit to like bringing some focus and operational excellence to this industry. I think an aspect where we've lagged behind a lot is just like be focused on your one thing, be professional about it, and like doom scrolling Twitter for 5 hours a day is not work. Very nice. We'll make sure to link your pages in the podcast description. Anywhere else where you want to point people to, where can they follow you? Where can they find you? How can they stay in touch? Very nice. Was great having you on, Slater, and hopefully we'll be able to welcome you back very soon when some next launch is coming up on EtherFi, or maybe for a debate about crypto cards, crypto restaking, and yeah, was great chatting. Have a good one.